Hello, all my lovely viewers out there, and welcome back to another A Memory of Light read-through by your one and only Calculator Ferret. Let me tell you, this time's reading is going to be super special because we're finally starting Chapter 1. I mean, it's been so frickin' long since we've been doing the prologue, you know? Well, I mean, it seems long to me because the prologue's so darn long. But finally, we are starting Chapter 1, people, and I am pumped. So let's get right into it. Woohoo! Chapter 1. Eastward the Wind Blew. The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. In one age, called the Third Age by some, an age yet to come, an age long past, a wind arose in the mountains of mist. The wind was not the beginning. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the wheel of time, but it was a beginning. Eastward the wind blew, descending from lofty mountains and coursing over desolate hills. It passed into the place known as the Westwood, an area that had once flourished of pine and leatherleaf. Here the wind found little more than tangled underbrush, thick save around an occasional towering oak. Those looked stricken by disease, bark peeling free, branches drooping. Elsewhere needles had fallen from tines, draping the ground in a brown blanket. None of the skeletal branches of the Westwood put forth buds. North and eastward the wind blew, across underbrush that crunched and cracked as it shook. It was night, and scrawny foxes picked over the rotting ground, searching in vain for prey or carrion. No spring buds had come to call, and most telling, the howls of wolves had gone silent across the land. The wind blew out of the forest and across Terran Ferry, or what was left of it. The town had been a fine one by local standards. Dark buildings, tall above their red stone foundations, a cobbled street built at the mouth of the land known as the Two Rivers. The smoke had long since stopped rising from burned buildings, but there was little left of the town to rebuild. Feral dogs hunted through the rubble for meat. They looked up as the wind passed, their eyes hungry. The wind crossed the river eastward. Here, clusters of refugees carrying torches walked the long road from Barrelone to Whitebridge, despite the late hour. They were sorry groups, with heads bowed, shoulders huddled. Some bore the coppery skin of Domani, their worn clothing displaying the hardships of crossing the mountains, with little in the way of supplies. Others came from farther off, Tarbaners with haunted eyes above dirty veils. Farmers and their wives from northern Guldian. All had heard rumors that in Andor there was food, in Andor there was hope. So far, they had yet to find either. Eastward the wind blew, along the river that wove between farms without crops, grasslands without grass, orchards without fruit. Abandoned villages, trees like bones with the flesh picked clean. Ravens often clustered in their branches, starveling rabbits and sometimes larger game picked through the dead grass underneath. Above it all, the omnipresent clouds pressed down upon the land. Sometimes that cloud cover made it impossible to tell whether it was night or day. As the wind approached the grand city of Camlin, it turned northward, away from the burning city, orange, red, and violent, spewing forth black smoke towards the hungry clouds above. War had come to Andor in the still of night. The approaching refugees would soon discover that they had been marching towards danger. It was not surprising. Danger was in all directions. The only way to avoid walking towards it would have been to stand still. As the wind blew northward, it passed people sitting beside roads, alone or in small groups, staring with the eyes of the hopeless. Some lay as they hungered, looking up at those rumbling, boiling clouds. Other people trudged onward towards what, they knew not. The last battle, to the north, whatever that meant. The last battle was not hope. The last battle was death. But it was a place to be, a place to go. In the evening dimness, the wind reached a large gathering far to the north of Camelin. This wide field broke the forest-patched landscape, but it was overgrown of tents like fungi on a decaying log. Tens of thousands of soldiers waved beside campfires that were quickly denuding the area of timber. The wind blew among them, whipping smoke from fire into the faces of soldiers. The people here didn't display the same sense of hopelessness as the refugees, but there was a dread to them. They could see the sickened land. They could feel the clouds above. They knew. The world was dying. The soldiers stared at the flames, watching the wood be consumed. Ember by ember, what had once been alive turned to dust. A company of men inspected armor that had begun to rust despite being well oiled. A group of white-robed ale collected water, former warriors who refused to put up their weapons again, despite their tow having been served. A cluster of frightened servants, sure that tomorrow would bring war between the White Tower and the Dragon Reborn, organized stores inside tents, shaken by the wind. Men and women whispered the truth into the night. The end has come. The end has come. All will fall. The end has come. Laughter broke the air. Warm light spilled from a large tent at the center of the camp, bursting across the tent flap and from beneath the sides. Inside that tent, Rand al'Thor, the Dragon Reborn, laughed, head thrown back. "So what did she do?" Rand asked when the laughter subsided. He poured himself a cup of red wine, then went for Perrin, who blushed at the question. "He's become harder," Rand thought, "but somehow he hasn't lost that innocence of his. Not completely." To Rand, that seemed like a marvelous thing. A wonder, like a pearl discovered in a trout. Perrin was strong, but his strength hadn't broken him. "Well," Perrin said, "you know how Merrin is. She somehow manages to look at even Sen as if he were a child in need of mothering. Finding Fail and me lying there on the ground like two fool youths? Well, I think she was torn between laughing at us and sending us into the kitchen to scrub dishes. Well, separately, to keep us out of trouble." Rand smiled, trying to picture it. Perrin. Burly, solid Perrin, so weak he could barely walk. It was an incongruous image. Rand wanted to assume his friend was exaggerating, but Perrin didn't have a dishonest hair in his body. Strange how much a man could change while his core remained exactly the same. "Anyways," Perrin said after taking a drink of wine, "Fail picked me up off the floor and set me on the horse, and the two of us pranced about looking important. I didn't do much. The fighting was accomplished by the others. I'd have had trouble lifting a cup to my lips." He stopped, his golden eyes growing distant. "You should be proud of them, Rand. Without them, without Daniel, your father, and Matt's father, without all of them, I wouldn't have managed half of what I did. No, not even a tenth." "I believe it," Rand said, regarding his wine. Lews Therin had loved wine. A part of Rand, that distant part, the memories of a man he had been, was displeased by the vintage. Not the ones he had sampled, at least. Few wines in the current world could match the favored vintages of the ages of... Alright. Few wines in the current age could match the pleased vintages of the Age of Legends. Not the ones he had sampled, at least. He took a small drink, then set the wine aside. Min still slumbered in another part of the tent, sectioned off of a curtain. Events in Rand's dreams had awakened him. He had been glad for Perrin's arrival to take his mind off of what he had seen. Mirian. No. He would not let that woman distract him. That was probably the point of what he had seen. "Walk with me," Rand said. "I need to check on some things for tomorrow." They went out into the night. Several maidens fell into step behind them as Rand walked towards 7 Balweir, whose services Perrin had loaned to Rand. Which is fine of Balweir, who was prone to gravitate towards those holding the greatest power. "Rand?" Perrin asked, walking beside him with a hand on Melchior. I've told you about all this before. The siege of the two rivers, the fighting. Why ask after it again? I've asked about the events before, Perrin. I asked after what happened, but I didn't ask after the people it happened to. He looked at Perrin, making a globe of light for them to see by as they walked into the night. I need to remember the people. Not doing this so is a mistake I've made too often in the past. The stirring wind carried the scent of campfires from Perrin's nearby camp, and the sounds of smiths working on weapons. Rand had heard the stories. Power-wrought weapons discovered again. Perrin's men were working overtime, running as two Ashmen ragged, to make as many as possible. Rand had lent him as many Ashmen as he could spare, if only because, as soon as they'd heard, he'd had dozens of maidens presenting themselves and demanding power-wrought spearheads. It only makes sense, Randall Thor, Bear Alnad had explained. His smiths can make 4 spearheads for every sword. She'd grimace saying the word sword, as if it tasted like seawater. Rand had never tasted seawater. Lews Therin had. Knowing facts like that greatly discomforted him once. Now he had learned to accept that part of him. Can you believe what has happened to us? Perrin asked. Light, sometimes I wonder when the man who owns all these fancy clothes is going to walk in on me and start yelling, then send me out to muck the stables for being too big-headed for my collar. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, Perrin. We become what we need to become. Perrin nodded as they walked from the paths between tents, lit by the glow of the light above Perrin's hand. How does it feel? Perrin asked. These memories you've gained. Have you ever had a dream that upon awakening you remembered in stark clarity? Not one that faded quickly, but one that stayed with you throughout the day? Yes, Perrin said, sounding oddly reserved. Yes, I can say that I have. It's like that, Rand said. I can remember being Lews Therin, can remember doing what he did, as one remembers actions in a dream. It was me doing them, but I don't necessarily like them, or think I'd take those actions if I were in my waking mind. That doesn't change the fact that, in the dream, they seem like the right actions. Perrin nodded. He's me, Rand said, and I'm him, but at the same time, I'm not. Well, you still seem like yourself, Perrin said, though Rand caught a slight hesitation on the word seem. Had Perrin been about to say smell instead? You haven't changed that much. Rand doubted if he could explain it to Perrin without sounding mad. The person he became when he wore the mantle of the Dragon Reborn, that wasn't simply an act, wasn't simply a mask. It was who he was. He had not changed, he had not transformed, he had merely accepted. That didn't mean he had all the answers. Despite 400 years of memories nestled in his brain, he still worried about what he had to do. Lews Therin hadn't known how to seal the bore. His attempt had led to disaster. The taint, the breaking, all for an imperfect prison of seals that were now brittle. One answer kept coming back to Rand. A dangerous answer. One that Lews Therin hadn't considered. What if the answer wasn't to seal the Dark One away again? What if the answer, the final answer, was something else? Something more permanent? Yes, Rand thought to himself for the 100th time, but is it possible? They arrived at the tent where the clerks worked, the maidens fanning out behind them, Rand and Perrin entering. The clerks were up late, of course, and they didn't look surprised to see Rand enter. My Lord Dragon, Baleware said, bowing stiffly from where he stood beside a table of maps and stacks of paper. The dried-up little man sorted his papers nervously, one knobbly elbow protruding from a hole in his oversized brown coat. Report, Rand said. Rodrin will come, Baleware said, his voice thin and precise. The Queen of Andor sent for him, promising him gateways made by those kinswomen of hers. Our eyes in his court say he is angry that he needs her help to attend, but is insistent that he needs to be at this meeting, if only so he doesn't look left out. Excellent, Rand said. Elaine knows nothing of your spies? My lord, Baleware said, sounding indignant. Have you determined who is spying for her among our clerks? Rand asked. Baleware sputtered, Nobody. She'll have someone, Baleware, Rand said with a smile. She all but taught me how to do this, after all. No matter. After tomorrow, my intentions will be manifest for all. Secrets won't be needed. None save the ones I keep closest to my own heart. That means everyone will be here for the meeting, right? Perrin asked. Every major ruler? Tyr and Ilian? The Amyrlin persuaded them to attend, Balweir said. I have copies of their exchanges here if you wish to see them, my lord. I would, Rand said. Send them to my tent. I will look them over tonight. The shaking of the ground came suddenly. Clerks grabbed stacks of papers, holding them down and crying out as furniture crashed to the ground around them. Outside, men shouted, barely audible over the sounds of trees breaking, metal clanging. The land groaned, a distant rumble. Rand felt it like a painful muscle spasm. Thunder shook the sky, distant, like a promise of things to come. The shaking subsided. The clerks remained holding on to their stacks of paper, as if afraid to let go and risk them toppling. It's really here, Rand thought, and I'm not ready. We're not ready, but it's here anyways. He had spent many months fearing this day, ever since Trollocs had come in the night, ever since Lan and Moraine had dragged him from the two rivers. He had feared what was to come. The last battle, the end. He found himself unafraid now that it had come, worried, but not afraid. I'm coming for you, Rand thought. Tell the people, Rand said to his clerk, post warnings. Earthquakes will come. Storms will come. Real ones, terrible ones. There will be a breaking, and we cannot avoid it. The Dark One will try to grind this world to dust. The clerks nodded, shooting concerned glances at one another by lamplight. Perrin looked contemplative, but nodded faintly, as if to himself. Any other news? Rand asked. The Queen of Andor may be up to something tonight, my lord, Balweir said. Something is not a very descriptive word, Balweir, Rand said. Balweir grimaced. I'm sorry, my lord. I don't have more for you yet. I only just received this note. Queen Elaine was awakened by some of her advisors a short time ago. I don't have anyone close enough to know why. Rand frowned, resting his hand on Layman's sword at his waist. Let me just repeat that. Rand frowned, resting his hand on Layman's sword at his waist. It could just be about plans for tomorrow, Perrin said. True, Rand said. Let me know if you discover anything, Balweir. Thank you. You do well here. The man stood taller. In these last days so dark, every man looked for something useful to do. Balweir was the best at what he did, and was confident in his own abilities. Still, it did no harm to be reminded of that fact by one who employed him, particularly if his employer was none other than the Dragon Reborn. Rand left the tent, Perrin following. You're worried about it, Perrin said. Whatever it was that woke Elaine. They would not awaken her without good cause, Rand said softly, considering her state. Pregnant. Pregnant with his children. Light. He had only just learned of it. Why hadn't she been the one to tell him? The answer was simple. Elaine could feel Rand's emotions as he felt hers. She would have been able to feel how he had been recently, before dragging him out. Back when... Well, she wouldn't have wanted to confront him with a pregnancy when he'd been in such a state. Beyond that, he hadn't exactly made himself easy to find. Still, it was a shock. I'm going to be a father, he thought, not for the first time. Yes, Lews Therin had children, and Perrin could remember them and his love for them. It wasn't the same. He, Rand al'Thor, would be a father, assuming he'd won the last battle. They wouldn't have awakened Elaine without good reason, he continued, returning to task. I'm worried, not because of what might have happened, but because of the potential distraction. Tomorrow will be an important day. If the Shadow hasn't any inkling of tomorrow's importance, it will try whatever it can to keep us from meeting, from unifying. Perrin scratched at his beard. I have people close to Elaine, people who keep watching things for me. Rand raised his hand. Let's go talk to them. I have a great deal to do tonight, but yes, I can't let this slip. The two turned towards Perrin's camp nearby, picking up their pace, Rand's bodyguards falling like shadows with veils and spears. The night felt too quiet. Egwene, in her tent, worked on a letter to Rand. She was not certain if she would send it. Sending it was not important. Writing it was about organizing her thoughts, determining what she wished to say to him. Gallion pushed his way into the tent again, hand on his sword, warder cloak rustling. "Are you going to stay in this time?" Egwene asked, dipping her pen. "Or are you going to go back out again?" No, let me just do that entire thing again. "Are you going to stay in this time?" Egwene asked, dipping her pen. "Or are you going to go right back out again?" "I don't like this night, Egwene." He looked over his shoulder. Let me do that over again. I don't like this night, Egwene. He looked over his shoulder. "Something feels wrong about it." The world holds its breath, Gallion, waiting upon the events of the morrow. "Did you send to Elaine as I requested?" "Yes. She won't be awake. It's too late for her." "We shall see." It wasn't long for a messenger arrived from Elaine's camp, bearing a small, folded letter. Egwene read it, then smiled. "Come," she said to Gallion, rising and gathering a few things. She waved a hand, and a gateway split the air. "We're traveling there?" Gallion asked. "It's only a short walk." "A short walk would require the Amyrlin to call upon the Queen of Andor," Egwene said, as Gallion stepped to the gateway first and checked the other side. "Sometimes I don't want to take an action that starts people asking questions." Cian would have killed for this ability, Egwene thought as she stepped to the gateway. How many more plots could that woman have spun if she'd only been able to visit others as quickly, quietly, and easily as this? On the other side, Elaine stood beside a warm brazier. The Queen wore a pale green dress, her belly swollen from the babies within. She hastened over to Egwene and kissed her ring. Bridget stood to one side of the tent flaps, arms folded, wearing her short red jacket and wide sky-blue trousers, her golden braid down over one shoulder. Gallion cocked an eyebrow at his sister. "I'm surprised you're awake." "I'm waiting for a report," Elaine said, gesturing for Egwene to join her in a pair of cushioned chairs beside the brazier. "Something important?" Egwene asked. Elaine frowned. "Jessamine forgot to check in again from Camlin. I left that woman strict orders to send to me every 2 hours, and yet she dallies. Light, it's probably nothing. Still, I asked Serenia to go to the traveling grounds to check on things for me. I hope you don't mind." "You need rest," Gallion said, folding his arms. "Thank you very much for the advice," Elaine said, "which I will ignore, as I ignored Bridget when she said the same thing. Mother, what is it that you wanted to discuss?" Egwene handed over the letter she had been working on. "To Rand?" Elaine asked. "You have a different perspective on him than I. Tell me what you think of this letter. I might not send it to him. I haven't decided yet." "The tone is forceful," Elaine noted. "He doesn't seem to respond to anything else." After a moment of reading, Elaine lowered the letter. "Perhaps we should simply let him do as he wishes." "Break the seals?" Egwene asked. "Release the Dark One?" "Why not?" "Light, Elaine." "Oh, it has to happen. It has to happen, doesn't it?" Elaine asked. "I mean, the Dark One's going to escape. He's practically free already." Egwene rubbed her temples. "There's a difference between touching the world and being free. During the War of Power, the Dark One was never truly released into the world. The Boar let him touch it, but that was resealed before he could escape. If the Dark One had entered the world, the wheel itself would have been broken. Here, I brought this to show you." Egwene retrieved a stack of notes from her satchel. The sheets had been hastily gathered by the librarians of the 13th Depository. "I'm not saying that we shouldn't break the seals," Egwene said. "I'm saying that we can't afford to risk one of Rand's crack-brained screams. We can't afford to risk one of Rand's crack-brained screams. Oh my gosh. Okay. We can't afford to risk one of Rand's cracked brain. I'll get this. I'm saying that we can't afford to risk one of Rand's cracked-brained schemes with this." Elaine smiled fondly. Light, but she was smitten. I can rely on her, can't I? It was hard to tell, Elaine, these days. The woman's ploy of those kinswomen. The woman's ploy of those kinswomen. We have unfortunately found nothing pertinent in your library terangral. The statue of the smiling bearded man nearly caused a riot in the tower. Every sister had wanted to read the thousands of books that it held. All the books seem to have been written before the boar was opened. They will keep searching, but these notes contain everything we could gather, on the seals, the prison, and the Dark One. If we break the seals at the wrong time, I fear it will mean an end to all things. Here, read this. She handed a page to Elaine. The Kerothian cycle? Elaine asked, curious. And light shall fail, and dawn shall not come, and still the captive rails. The captive is the Dark One? I think so, Egwene said. The prophecies are never clear. Ren intends to enter the last battle and break the seals immediately, but that is a dreadful idea. We have an extended war ahead of us. Freeing the Dark One now will strengthen the forces of the Shadow and weaken us. If it is to be done, and I still don't know that it has to be, we should wait until the last possible moment. At the very least, we need to discuss it. Rand has been right about many things, but he has been wrong too. This is not a decision he should be allowed to make alone. Elaine shuffled through the sheets of paper, then stopped on one of them. His blood shall give us the light. She rubbed the page of her thumb, as if lost in thought. Wait upon the light. Who added this note? That is Danelia Alvian's copy of the Termandial translation of the Kerothian cycle, Egwene said. Danelia made her own notes, and they have been the subject of nearly as much discussion among scholars as the prophecies themselves. She was a dreamer, you know, the only Amerlin that we know of to be one. Before me, anyways. Yes, Elaine said. Yes, Elaine said. The sisters who gathered these for me came to the same conclusion that I have, Egwene said. There may be a time to break the seals, but that time is not at the start of the last battle, whatever Rand thinks. We must wait for the right moment, and as the Watcher of the Seals, it is my duty to choose that moment. I won't risk the world on one of Rand's overly dramatic stratagems. He has a fair bit of gleeman in him, Elaine said, again fondly. Your argument is a good one, Egwene. Make it to him. He will listen to you. He does have a good mind, and he can be persuaded. We shall see. For now, Egwene suddenly sensed a spike of alarm from Gallion. She glanced over to see him turning. Hoofbeats outside. His ears weren't any better than Egwene's, but it was his job to listen for things like this. Egwene embraced the true source, causing Elaine to do likewise. Bridget already had the tent flaps open, hand in her sword. A frazzled messenger leaped from horseback outside, eyes wide. She scrambled into the tent, Bridget and Gallion falling in beside her immediately, watching in case she came too close. She didn't. Camelin is under attack, Your Majesty, the woman said, gasping for breath. What? Elaine leaped to her feet. How? Did Jared Saran finally... Trollocs, the messenger said. It started near dusk. Impossible, Elaine said, grabbing the messenger by the arm and hauling her out of the tent. Egwene followed hastily. It's been over 6 hours since dusk, Elaine said to the messenger. Why haven't we heard anything till now? What happened to the kinswomen? I was not told, my queen, the messenger said. Captain Guybone sent me to fetch you at speed. He just arrived at the gateway. The traveling ground was not far from Elaine's tent. A crowd had gathered, but men and women made way for the Amerlin and Queen. In moments the two of them reached the front. A group of men in bloody clothing trudged through the open gateway, pulling carts laden of Elaine's new weapons, the dragons. Many of the men seemed near collapse. They smelled of smoke, and their skin was blackened by soot. Not a few of them slumped unconscious as Elaine's soldiers grabbed the carts, which were obviously meant for horses to pull, to help them. Other gateways open nearby as Serenia Sade and some of the stronger of the kinswomen, Egwene wouldn't think of them as Elaine's kinswomen, created them. Refugees poured through like the waters of a suddenly unstopped river. Go, Egwene said to Gallion, weaving her own gateway, one to the traveling grounds in the White Tower's camp nearby. Send for as many Aes Sedai as we can rouse. Tell Bryn to send his soldiers Tell them to do as Elaine orders and send them through gateways to the outskirts of Camelin. We will show solidarity with Andor." Galleon nodded, ducking through the gateway. Egwene let it vanish, then joined Elaine near the gathering of wounded, confused soldiers. Sumiko of the kinswomen had taken charge of seeing that healing was given to those in immediate danger. The air was thick with the smell of smoke. As Egwene turned to Elaine, she caught sight of something through one of the gateways. Camelin afire. Light! She stood stunned for a moment, then hurried on. Elaine was speaking of Guybone, commander of the Queen's Guard. The handsome man seemed barely able to remain on his feet, his clothing and arms alarmingly bloodied. "Dark friends killed 2 of the women you left to send messages, Your Majesty," he was saying in a tired voice. "Another fell in the fighting, but we retrieved the dragons. Once we escaped," he seemed pained by something. "Once we escaped through the hole in the city wall, we found that several mercenary bands were making their way around the city towards the gate the Lord Talmanes had left defended. By coincidence, they were near enough to aid in our escape." "You did well," Elaine said. "But the city—" "You did well," Elaine repeated, voice firm. "You retrieved the dragons and rescued all these people? I will see you rewarded for this, Captain." "Give your reward to the men of the band, Your Majesty. It was their work. And please, if you can do anything for Lord Talmanes." He gestured to the fallen man whom several members of the band had just carried through the gateway. Elaine knelt beside him, and Egwene joined her. At first, Egwene assumed that Talmanes was dead, with his skin blackened. Then he drew a ragged breath. "Light," Elaine said, delving his prostrate form. "I've never seen anything like this." "Thakandar blades," Guybone said. "This is far beyond either of us," Egwene said to Elaine, standing. She trailed off, hearing something over the groans of soldiers and carts creaking. "Egwene?" Elaine asked softly. "Do what you can for him," Egwene said, standing and rushing away. She pushed through the confused crowd, following the voice. "Was that—" "Yes, there." She found an open gateway at the edge of the traveling grounds, Aes Sedai in a variety of clothing hurrying through them to see to the wounded. Galleon had done his work well. Nineveh was asking, quite loudly, who was in charge of this mess. Egwene approached her from the side and grabbed her by the shoulder, surprising her. "Mother?" Nineveh asked. What is this about Camelin burning? She cut off as she saw the wounded. She stiffened, then tried to go to them. "There is one you need to go to first," Egwene said, leading her to where Talmanes lay. Nineveh drew in a sharp breath, then went to her knees and pushed Elaine gently aside. Nineveh delved Talmanes, then froze, eyes wide. "Nineveh?" Egwene asked. "Can you—" An explosion of weeds burst from Nineveh, like the sudden light of a sun coming out from beneath clouds. Nineveh wove the 5 powers together in a column of radiance, then set it driving into Talmanes' body. Egwene left her to her work. Perhaps it would be enough, though he looked far gone. With the light willing, the man would live. She had been impressed with him in the past. He seemed precisely the type of man the band, and Matt, needed. Elaine was near the dragons, and was questioning a woman with her hair in braids. That must be Aludra, who had created the dragons. Egwene walked up to the weapons, resting her fingers in one of the long bronze tubes. She had been given reports on them, of course. Some men said they were like Aes Sedai, cast in metal and fueled with the powders from fireworks. More and more refugees poured through the gateway, many of them townspeople. "Light," Egwene said to herself. "There are too many of them. We can't house all of Camelin here at Marilor." Elaine finished her conversation, leaving Aludra to inspect the wagons. It appeared that the woman wasn't willing to rest for the night and see to them in the morning. Elaine walked towards the gateways. "The soldiers say the area outside the city is secure," Elaine said, passing Egwene. "I'm going through to have a look." "Elaine," Burdett said, coming up behind her. "We're going. Come on." Egwene left the Queen to it, stepping back to supervise the work. Romanda had taken charge of the Aes Sedai and was organizing the injured, separating them into groups depending on the urgency of their wounds. As Egwene surveyed the chaotic mix, she noticed a pair of people standing nearby. A woman and man, illy nursed by the look of them. "What do you two want?" The woman knelt beside her, and the woman knelt before her. The fair-skinned, dark-haired woman had a fairness to her features, despite her tall, slender build. "I am Egwene," she said in an unmistakable accent. "I was accompanying Nineveh today when the call for healing was raised. We followed her here." "You're Ciachin," Egwene said, startled. "I have come to serve you, Amerlin Seat." Ciachin. Egwene still held the one power. Light. Not every Ciachin she met was dangerous to her. Still, she would not take chances. As some members of the tower guard came through one of the gateways, Egwene pointed to the Ciachin pair. "Take those two somewhere safe and keep watching them. I'll deal with them later." The soldiers nodded. The man went reluctantly, the women more easily. She couldn't channel, so she wasn't afraid to mane. That didn't mean she wasn't a Saldam, though. Egwene returned to Nineveh, who was still knelt beside the Talmanes. The sickness had returned from the man's skin, leaving it pale. "Take him somewhere to rest," Nineveh said tiredly to several watching members of the band. "I've done what I can." She looked up at Egwene as the men carried him away. "Light," Nineveh whispered. "That took a lot out of me. Even with my Ongro. I'm impressed that Moraine managed to tame all that time ago." There seemed to be a note of pride in Nineveh's voice. She had wanted to heal Tam, but could not, though of course Nineveh had not known what she had been doing at the time. She had come a long, long way since then. "Is it true, Mother?" Nineveh asked, rising. "About Camelin?" Egwene nodded. "This is going to be a long night," Nineveh said, looking at the wounded still pouring through the gateway. "And a longer tomorrow," Egwene said. "Here, let us link. I'll lend you my strength." Nineveh looked shocked. "Mother? You are better at healing than I," Egwene smiled. "I may be Amerlin, Nineveh, but I am still Aes Sedai, servant of all. My strength will be of use to you." Nineveh nodded, and they linked. The two of them joined the group of Aes Sedai that Romana had set. Let me start that again. The two of them joined the group of Aes Sedai that Romana had set healing the refugees with the worst wounds.